Now, the Blue Drop report has found that the quality of South Africa's drinking water is on the decline. Several municipalities are failing to meet the required standard for quality water supply. The Development Bank of Southern Africa offers a range of financial and non-financial solutions for the water and sanitation sector to address the country's infrastructure challenges. Now, the organization's disruption specialist, Johann Lübbe, joins me now. Very good evening to you. Thank you so much for your time. There have been claims over the years in the past that South Africa is one of 12 countries in the world with safe drinking water. Looking at the massive infrastructure issues we're facing today, how accurate is that?
Yeah, well, I think it's there's a lot of information available about the state of the infrastructure. The Department of Water and Sanitation has just released the blue, green and no drop reports. So I think one needs to take cognizance of that and then determine what is it that we are trying to do and what do we need to do. So I think that's where the department has established the Water Partnerships Office, which is really aimed at, or with the objective of seeing how can we get the private sector more involved in supporting government to solve some of these challenges. We know that the challenges are excessive, but we also know that the private sector has got a lot of expertise and there's also a lot of funding in the private sector. But where we are often lacking is we don't know how to get those opportunities to the private sector. And that's one of the objectives of the Water Partnerships Office, is to see how we can support government, create the opportunities, facilitate these opportunities, and then craft solutions and with partnerships with the private sector. So that's one of the main focuses of the office in trying to address some of the challenges. We know what the problems are, but we don't always have the solutions, and we've been struggling to get that. So that is really what we are focusing on at the moment, is to see how we can get the private sector more involved and support government in providing some of these solutions.
Let's perhaps look more into the problems here, because it's still unclear how the government plans to contain the cholera outbreak in Hammanskraal when the source is unknown. And there's also questions of where the 4 billion rand to fix the Rooiwal water treatment plant will come from.
Yes, I mean, Rooiwal has been in the news recently for obvious reasons. We know that there are challenges there. We have to address that. And there are a couple of options, I think, that we have available. So you asked the question around where is the funding going to come from. So if one of the options is that we can potentially leverage future grant funding, and we know the grants flow to government on an annual basis or to municipalities. So one option is to secure, raise the funding up front, and then secure that through a portion of the future grants. The other option is, of course, more of a project finance type of solution, where one can structure a public-private partnership between government and the private sector, and raising the funding can then be against future project revenues that can be generated. So that is, the treatment tariffs that are paid by residents, and can then be ring-fenced to ensure that you repay the investment. So there are a couple of options that I think is available, and potentially a hybrid or a combination of these options is what one will then have to look at. But I think the crux here and the key is obviously the political will for us to get the private sector involved. The private sector is there and ready, and they want to play a role, and they've got the expertise and the funding, as I've mentioned earlier. We just need to structure these projects in the right way, and that's where the project preparation activities is focusing on. Yes, we have to look at Rooiwal, and there are similar cases in the rest of the country as we know, but we need to see what can we do in the short term to address the challenges. And as you said, we don't know if the cholera outbreak emanates from a Rooiwal. It can also come from somewhere else, but we know we have to address the challenge. So we have to then look at something that we can do in the short term, but then also look at the longer term extensions to the Rooiwal plant.
Yeah. In looking, pardon me, just before you talk about the next bit, in looking at the short-term solutions, I mean, what would you put on the table? Because you make mention of, you know, hybrid solution. Perhaps one option would include residents also putting some money on the table. But looking at the demographics in Hammanskraal, the possibilities around that option might not be successful. What are you proposing when you look at short-term solutions, and also perhaps some detail around the non-financial solutions?
Yes, I think the short term, there's some funding that the City of Tshwane has made available. The DBSA is in conversation with the department and with the municipality to see what immediate action can be taken. There are some other options that's also being considered. So, you know, that is addressing some of the immediate challenges. If we then shift more towards the longer term solution, that will still require some preparation work, looking at what finances are available. And yes, you're correct in saying that there might not always be sufficient revenues coming from residents in paying for services. So one will then have to see what is that limitation, and how do we then supplement that with potential future grant funding coming from government. So again, not a solution that is just one aspect. We have to look at a combination of solutions, and then also looking at integrating with the downstream water purification plants. You know, what often happens is that because of the poor quality of the raw water being discharged from the wastewater treatment works upstream, the downstream water purification plants cannot cope with that poor quality of the water, and it's then not operating effectively. So we have to sometimes look at these things as an integrated system to say, let's look at all the upstream wastewater treatment works. If we can improve the quality of the raw water being discharged, it will then mean that the water purification plants can function much more optimally. Yeah. And looking at these as an integrated solution, so you're combining your water and your wastewater into one project, which can then be structured in different ways, as we've mentioned.
Very well. Thank you so much for your time. Let's perhaps leave it there for now. Johann Lübbe, disruption specialist at Developmental Bank of Southern Africa, speaking to us there about some solutions when it comes to the water crisis.